It was late at night in a quiet part of Chicago. The streets were mostly empty except for the occasional car passing by or a neighbor walking their dog. Streetlights flickered softly, casting long shadows across the sidewalks. It was the kind of place where people felt safe, where nothing exciting ever seemed to happen. But tonight that sense of calm would soon shatter. Marcus Johnson stood near his car, parked just outside a small cafe on the corner of Maple Street. He had chosen this spot carefully. It was quiet, out of the way, and perfect for meeting someone who didn't want to be seen. Marcus wasn't there for coffee, though. He was waiting for Lisa Monroe, an informant who claimed she had important information about a case he'd been working on for months. The case involved a string of cyber attacks targeting major banks and corporations. Someone was stealing millions of dollars through sophisticated hacking techniques, and Marcus believed it was connected to organized crime. Whoever was behind it was smart, careful, and always one step ahead. That's why Lisa's call had caught his attention. She worked as a low-level technician for a company linked to the attacks, and if her tip panned out, Marcus might finally have the break he needed. He glanced at his watch. It was almost midnight. Lisa was running late, but Marcus wasn't worried, yet. Informants often took their time, especially when they were nervous. Still, standing alone in the dark made him uneasy. He kept one hand resting lightly on the hood of his car while the other stayed close to his sidearm. Years of experience had taught him to stay alert, even in seemingly harmless situations. As he waited, Marcus thought about how much was riding on this meeting. If Lisa really did have proof tying the hackers to a larger criminal organization, it could bring down some very powerful people. But getting evidence like that wasn't easy. People who knew too much tended to disappear, or worse. Marcus had promised Lisa protection, but promises didn't always mean much in his line of work. Suddenly, the sound of tires rolling over gravel broke the silence. Marcus turned his head toward the noise and saw a police cruiser pull up behind his car. Two officers stepped out, one man and one woman, and approached him cautiously. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, with short brown hair and a stern expression. The woman had blonde hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, and her sharp eyes scanned the area as if expecting trouble. "Sir," the male officer said, raising his voice so Marcus could hear him clearly, "can you please step away from the vehicle?" Marcus frowned, taken aback by the sudden appearance of the police. He raised both hands slowly, showing that he wasn't reaching for anything dangerous. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said calmly. "I'm waiting for someone." "We received a report about suspicious activity in the area," the female officer added, her hand resting on the grip of her holstered weapon. Her tone was firm, but not aggressive. "Can you tell us what you're doing here?" "I'm Agent Marcus Johnson with the FBI," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady. "I'm meeting an informant. This is official business." The officers exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. "Do you have any identification?" the male officer asked. Marcus nodded. "Yes, I do. Let me get my badge." He began to reach into his jacket pocket. But before he could even touch the edge of his badge, the officers reacted instantly. "Stop moving!" the male officer shouted, taking a step forward. Both officers drew their weapons, pointing them directly at Marcus. Their faces were tense, their bodies rigid with readiness. Marcus froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He understood why they were reacting this way. It wasn't every day that someone reached into their jacket in front of armed police officers, but he couldn't help feeling frustrated. He was trying to cooperate, not cause trouble. "I'm reaching for my badge," he said slowly, enunciating each word carefully. "I'm FBI. You don't need to point your guns at me." But the officers weren't listening, or maybe they didn't believe him. Either way, they ordered him to turn around and put his hands on the hood of his car. Marcus obeyed, knowing that arguing wouldn't help. As he leaned forward, his mind raced. How had this situation spiraled so quickly? Who had called the police, and why? The male officer pressed down on Marcus's back, forcing him to stay bent over while the female officer searched him. They found his badge fairly quickly, but instead of easing the tension, it only seemed to make things worse. "This doesn't prove anything," the male officer muttered. "Anyone can fake a badge." Marcus bit back a sharp retort. Now wasn't the time to argue. Instead, he tried to stay calm, reminding himself that this was probably all a big misunderstanding. Once they verified his identity, everything would be fine. At least, that's what he hoped. By now, a small crowd had gathered nearby. Some passers-by had stopped to watch, curious about what was happening. Others filmed the scene on their phones, capturing every moment. Marcus could feel their eyes on him, judging him without knowing the full story. It was humiliating, but he tried not to let it bother him. He'd faced worse situations before. As the officers finished searching him, Marcus noticed something odd. A black van was parked across the street, its engine idling quietly. Two men sat inside, watching the scene unfold. Something about them didn't sit right with Marcus. They weren't locals, that much was clear. And they weren't just bystanders either. There was something deliberate about the way they were observing everything, as if they were waiting for something specific to happen. Before Marcus could say anything, the officers tightened the handcuffs around his wrists and led him toward their patrol car. "You'll have to come with us," the male officer said gruffly. "We'll sort this out at the station." Marcus wanted to protest, to explain that he was in the middle of an investigation and couldn't afford to waste time at the station, but he knew it wouldn't do any good. For now, he had no choice but to go along with them and hope that cooler heads would prevail once they realized who he was. Little did Marcus know, the real trouble was only beginning. Across the street, the black van's headlights flickered on and the two men inside exchanged a glance. One of them picked up a walkie-talkie and whispered something into it. Whatever was coming next, Marcus sensed it wouldn't be good. The air was thick with tension as Marcus stood handcuffed beside the patrol car. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He'd been calm, cooperative, and even shown them his badge. Yet here he was, treated like a criminal. It didn't add up. Something wasn't right, and Marcus could feel it in his gut. Across the street, the black van remained parked, its engine still running quietly. The two men inside hadn't moved, but Marcus noticed one of them adjusting, something on his lap. At first glance, it looked like a phone or maybe a radio. Whatever it was, it made Marcus uneasy. He couldn't shake the feeling that these strangers were connected to why he was here tonight. Lisa Monroe arrived moments later, her footsteps hurried and uneven as she approached the scene. She carried a small backpack slung over one shoulder, her face pale with worry. When she saw Marcus in handcuffs, her eyes widened in shock. "What's going on?" she demanded, her voice trembling slightly. "Why are you arresting him?" Officer Carter, the male officer, stepped forward, raising a hand to stop her from coming closer. "Ma'am, please stay back," he said firmly. "This is police business." "But he's FBI," Lisa blurted out, panic rising in her tone. "You've got the wrong guy." Megan Doyle, the female officer, exchanged a glance with her partner. They both looked skeptical. "We'll verify his credentials later," Megan replied coolly. "For now, we need you to step away." Lisa hesitated, glancing nervously at Marcus. Her fingers tightened around the straps of her backpack. Inside, it was the evidence she'd promised to give him, the flash drive containing critical information about Victor Kane's cybercrime operation. If she handed it over now, it might get lost in the chaos. But if she waited too long, someone else might find her. Marcus caught her eye and gave a subtle shake of his head. "Don't say anything more." His expression seemed to plead. Lisa swallowed hard and nodded almost imperceptibly. For now, she would play along, but she knew time was running out. As the seconds ticked by, the tension grew thicker. Marcus kept glancing toward the black van, his instincts screaming that trouble was imminent. The two men inside hadn't left their vehicle, but they weren't exactly hiding either. One of them leaned forward slightly, speaking into what appeared to be a walkie-talkie. A few moments later, another car pulled up behind the van, this one unmarked and nondescript. 3 more men stepped out, all dressed in dark clothing and carrying what looked like tactical gear. Marcus's heart sank. This wasn't just a random misunderstanding anymore. Someone had planned this, someone who wanted him distracted, disarmed, and vulnerable, and judging by the way things were unfolding, they weren't planning to let him walk away. "Officers," Marcus said suddenly, his voice low but urgent. "Do you see those men across the street? In the van and the other car?" Both officers turned their heads briefly, scanning the area. "What about them?" Officer Carter asked, his tone dismissive. "They're not part of this neighborhood," Marcus explained quickly. "They've been watching us since I got here. Something's not right." Megan frowned, narrowing her eyes at the vehicles. "Are you saying they're involved in whatever you're doing?" "I'm saying they're dangerous," Marcus shot back. "And if you don't pay attention, we're all going to regret it." Before either officer could respond, the sound of shattering glass cut through the night. Everyone froze, turning toward the source of the noise. One of the men from the second car had thrown a rock through the window of a nearby storefront. The crash echoed loudly, drawing gasps from the small crowd of onlookers. "What the hell is going on?" Officer Carter muttered, gripping his weapon tighter. It was then that the first gunshot rang out. Chaos erupted instantly. The man in the black van opened fire, aiming directly at the officers. Megan dove for cover behind the patrol car, shouting for everyone to take shelter. Officer Carter scrambled to return fire, but the attackers were well prepared, using the van as a barricade while advancing steadily. Marcus reacted immediately. Despite being handcuffed, he dropped to the ground, using the patrol car as cover. His training kicked in, overriding the fear and confusion. He shouted instructions to the officers, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Stay low. Aim for the tires of the van. They're trying to pin us down." Megan hesitated for a split second before following his advice. She fired several shots at the van's tires, causing one of them to deflate with a loud hiss. The attackers faltered momentarily, giving Marcus a chance to act. Using the distraction, Marcus grabbed hold of a piece of broken glass lying near the shattered storefront window. With quick, precise movements, he managed to cut through the plastic, zip ties binding his wrists. It stung, but he ignored the pain, focusing instead on the task at hand. Once free, Marcus sprang into action. He spotted one of the attackers reloading his weapon and lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The two men struggled briefly, but Marcus's superior strength and technique gave him the upper hand. Within seconds, he had disarmed the attacker and used his own weapon against him, forcing him to surrender. Meanwhile, Lisa crouched behind a nearby bench, clutching her backpack tightly. She wanted to help, but she didn't know how. All she could do was watch as Marcus fought to protect everyone, including her. Officer Carter and Megan continued exchanging fire with the remaining attackers, their movements becoming more coordinated as they followed Marcus's guidance. Slowly but surely, they began gaining the upper hand. Another attacker went down, wounded but alive, leaving only one man still standing. That's when Marcus noticed something alarming. The last attacker had taken aim, not at the officers, but at Lisa. Without hesitation, Marcus sprinted toward her, tackling her to the ground just as a bullet whizzed past where she had been standing. The impact knocked the wind out of both of them, but they were safe. "Stay down," Marcus whispered urgently, shielding her body with his own. "Don't move until I tell you." Lisa nodded, tears streaming down her face. She clutched her backpack even tighter, knowing that the evidence inside was worth risking everything for. But right now, survival came first. Back at the center of the fight, Officer Carter finally managed to subdue the final attacker, forcing him to drop his weapon and raise his hands in surrender. Megan rushed over to secure him, her breathing ragged but determined. As the dust settled, the sounds of sirens filled the air. Backup had finally arrived, though it felt like hours had passed instead of minutes. Paramedics and additional officers swarmed the scene, tending to the wounded and securing the area. Marcus stood up slowly, brushing himself off as adrenaline coursed through his veins. He glanced at Lisa, who was still shaken but unharmed, and then at Officers Carter and Megan, who now looked at him with a mixture of awe and guilt. "We need to talk," Marcus said simply, his voice steady despite everything that had just happened, "because this isn't over." And with that, the truth began to unravel piece by piece. The sound of sirens filled the air as backup units arrived at the scene. Red and blue lights flashed across the street, casting eerie shadows on the buildings and people. Paramedics rushed to tend to the wounded attackers, while additional officers worked quickly to secure the area. It was clear that the danger had passed, but the tension lingered like a heavy fog over everyone present. Marcus stood near the damaged black van, his breathing finally beginning to slow after the adrenaline rush of the fight. He glanced around, taking stock of the situation. The attackers were either subdued or receiving medical attention, and the crowd of bystanders had been pushed back by law enforcement. For now, the immediate threat was neutralized, but Marcus knew better than to relax just yet. Lisa sat on the curb a few feet away, her backpack still clutched tightly against her chest. A young officer hovered nearby, keeping an eye on her but not interfering. She looked shaken, her face pale and streaked with tears, but she hadn't said a word since Marcus tackled her to safety. Her silence worried him. Whatever was inside that backpack must have been weighing heavily on her mind. Officer Carter approached Marcus cautiously, his earlier skepticism replaced with something closer to respect. "Agent Johnson," he began, his tone more measured. "Now we need to understand what happened here tonight. Who are these men? And why were they targeting you?" Marcus nodded, understanding the urgency of the question. "These men work for someone very dangerous," he explained, keeping his voice low so only Carter and Megan could hear. "I've been investigating a cybercrime ring linked to organized crime. One name keeps coming up, Victor Kane. He's a tech mogul who operates behind the scenes, laundering money and funding illegal operations through hacking and fraud." Megan frowned, glancing toward Lisa. "And she's your informant?" she asked, pointing discreetly. "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "Her name is Lisa Monroe. She works for a company connected to Kane's operation. She reached out to me because she has evidence, proof that ties him directly to these crimes. That's why we're here tonight." Carter exchanged a glance with Megan, both of them processing the information. "If this Kane guy is as powerful as you say he is, then we've got a serious problem," Carter said grimly. "This wasn't just some random attack. They planned this carefully." Marcus agreed. "Exactly. Whoever tipped you off about me being suspicious probably did it on purpose, to distract us and make sure Lisa never handed over that evidence." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Which means there's a leak somewhere. Someone knows. We're on to them." Before anyone could respond, Lisa suddenly spoke up. "Agent Johnson," she called out, her voice trembling but insistent. "We don't have much time. If they know I'm alive, they'll send more people. We have to act fast." Marcus turned to her immediately, his focus sharp. "What do you mean, Lisa? What's in the backpack?" She hesitated for a moment, glancing nervously at the officers surrounding them. Then, with a deep breath, she unzipped the bag and pulled out a small flash drive. "This," she said, holding it up. "It contains files, encrypted, data from Kane's servers, bank records, transaction histories, messages between him and his associates. Everything you need to bring him down." Marcus felt a surge of relief mixed with urgency. This was it, the breakthrough he'd been waiting for. But he also knew that holding onto the flash drive made them all targets. "All right," he said firmly. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we get this evidence to a secure location. Second, we figure out how they found out about our meeting. And third, we start building a case strong enough to take Kane down before he realizes what hit him." Carter stepped forward, looking determined. "You're not doing this alone," he said. "We may have screwed up earlier, but we're with you now. Tell us what you need." Marcus appreciated the offer, though he couldn't help feeling cautious. These officers had misjudged him once already, and trust wasn't something he gave easily. Still, they were part of the system, and right now he needed all the help he could get. "Fine," he said after a moment. "But from now on we follow my lead. No exceptions." Megan nodded in agreement. "Understood. Just tell us where to start." "First," Marcus instructed, "secure Lisa. Get her somewhere safe where no one can find her, not even your own department. If Kane finds out she's alive, she's dead." He turned to Lisa, his expression softening slightly. Do you have any family or friends outside the city you can stay with until this blows over? Lisa shook her head. No one I trust, she admitted quietly. But I'll go wherever you think is best. Marcus sighed, knowing it wouldn't be easy to protect her. All right, we'll arrange something. Next, we need to examine the contents of that flash drive. Do you have access to secure facilities nearby where we can decrypt the data without risking exposure? Carter thought for a moment. There's a precinct lab downtown. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. It'll have to do, Marcus replied. Let's move. Time isn't on our side. As they prepared to leave the scene, Marcus noticed one of the captured attackers staring at him with cold, calculating eyes. Despite being handcuffed and guarded by multiple officers, the man didn't look afraid. In fact, he almost seemed amused. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. There was something unsettling about the way the man watched him, as if he knew something Marcus didn't. What's your name? Marcus asked, stepping closer despite the warnings from nearby officers. The man smirked, but didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back slightly, his gaze never wavering. You think you've won? He said finally, his voice low and mocking. But you're playing a game you don't understand. Victor Kane always wins. Marcus clenched his fists, resisting the urge to press further. He didn't want to give the man the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. Instead, he turned away, focusing on the task ahead. We'll see about that, he muttered under his breath. With the scene secured and plans in motion, Marcus climbed into the passenger seat of Carter's patrol car, with Lisa following close behind. Megan drove them toward the precinct lab, while Carter stayed behind to oversee cleanup efforts. The ride was quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts. For Marcus, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. He had the evidence he needed to take down one of the most powerful criminals in the country, but doing so would come at a cost. Lives were already at risk, including Lisa's. Every decision he made from this point forward would matter. When they arrived at the lab, Marcus wasted no time getting to work. He inserted the flash drive into a secure computer terminal and began decrypting the files. The process was slow, requiring patience and precision. As the data slowly revealed itself, Marcus couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and dread. This was the break he'd been waiting for, but it was also the beginning of a much larger battle. And somewhere out there, Victor Kane was watching, waiting, and planning his next move. The lab was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional click of keys as Marcus worked tirelessly to decrypt the files on the flash drive. The air felt thick with anticipation, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Every second counted, and Marcus knew it. If Victor Kane discovered what they were doing, or worse, who had betrayed him, it wouldn't take long for him to retaliate. Lisa hovered close to Marcus, her eyes darting between the monitors and the door. She hadn't said much since arriving at the lab, but her body language spoke volumes. Her fingers twisted the strap of her backpack anxiously, and she flinched at every unfamiliar sound. "Do you think we're safe here?" she whispered finally, breaking the silence. Marcus paused for a moment, glancing over his shoulder at her. "Safe enough," he replied calmly, though his tone betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "But we can't afford to let our guard down, not until this is done." Megan stood near the entrance, keeping watch. Her presence was reassuring, but even she seemed uneasy. This wasn't a typical night for her either. Usually, her job involved routine patrols and minor disturbances, not cybercrime investigations or shootouts with armed attackers. Still, she understood the gravity of the situation. If Kane's operation went unchecked, innocent people would suffer. That thought alone kept her focused. On the screen, lines of encrypted text began to unravel, revealing fragments of information, bank account numbers, transaction histories, emails, and messages. Each piece of data painted a clearer picture of Kane's empire, a sprawling network of illegal activities disguised as legitimate business ventures. It was overwhelming, but Marcus didn't let himself get distracted. He scanned through the files methodically, looking for anything that could serve as concrete evidence. "This is it," Marcus muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as he opened a particularly damning document. It was a communication thread between Kane and several other individuals, detailing plans for a massive cyber attack set to occur within the next 48 hours. The target? A major financial institution holding billions of dollars in assets. Lisa leaned closer, her breath catching as she read the message. That's huge, she stammered. If they pull this off, it'll cause chaos. Exactly, Marcus said grimly, which means we don't have much time. We need to stop them before it happens. Megan stepped forward, concern etched across her face. How do we do that? What's the plan? Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. He was exhausted, both physically and mentally, but there was no room for hesitation now. First, we alert the FBI headquarters. They'll coordinate with cybersecurity teams to block the attack. Second, we gather everything we've found here and prepare to present it to the authorities. Once we expose Kane's operation, we cut off his resources and isolate him. And then what? Megan pressed. Kane isn't going to sit back and let us take him down without a fight. You're right, Marcus admitted. He'll come after us harder than ever, but we'll be ready. For now, focus on securing this location. Make sure no one gets in or out without clearance. Megan nodded and moved to reinforce the perimeter, leaving Marcus and Lisa alone in the lab. The two of them continued working in silence, the weight of their mission hanging heavily in the air. As more files became accessible, Marcus started organizing them into categories: financial records, communications, operational plans. Each file added another layer to the case, building a stronger foundation for prosecution. Suddenly, Lisa gasped, pointing to one of the screens. "Wait, look at this," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with urgency. Marcus followed her gaze and froze. On the monitor was a list of names, people who had been paid off or coerced into aiding Kane's operation. Among them were prominent figures: politicians, corporate executives, law enforcement officials. It was a web of corruption, so vast it made Marcus's stomach churn. "This changes everything," he said quietly, his mind racing. "If these people are involved, exposing Kane won't just bring down his empire, it'll shake entire institutions to their core." Lisa looked pale, her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of the desk. "What does this mean for us? If half the people on that list are as powerful as they seem, how can we possibly win?" Marcus turned to her, his expression resolute despite the enormity of the challenge ahead. "We win by staying one step ahead, by using the truth as our weapon. These people may have power, but they're not untouchable, not anymore." As they continued analyzing the data, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't entirely alone. The lab was secure, yes, but something about the situation felt off. He glanced toward the door where Megan stood vigilant, then back at the monitors. Everything seemed normal, yet his instincts screamed that danger was lurking just out of sight. His suspicions were confirmed moments later when the lights flickered unexpectedly. The hum of the computers faltered, and the screens went black for a brief second before rebooting. Marcus swore under his breath, his heart pounding. "They're trying to hack us," he said sharply, turning to Lisa. "Quick, grab the flash drive. We can't risk losing this." Lisa fumbled with the drive, pulling it from the computer and shoving it into her pocket. Just as she did, an alarm blared throughout the lab, red warning lights flashing above their heads. Someone had breached the system. Megan burst into the room, her weapon drawn. "We've got company," she announced grimly. "Backup units are en route, but they're still minutes away." Marcus cursed again, his mind racing. Whoever was behind this wasn't messing around. They'd sent professionals, and they were closing in fast. "We need to move," he said decisively. "Now." Without waiting for further instructions, Lisa grabbed her backpack and followed Marcus as he led them toward a side exit. Megan stayed close behind, scanning the hallway for threats. The three of them moved quickly but cautiously, knowing that stepping into a trap could mean disaster. As they reached the exit, Marcus paused, peering through the small window in the door. Outside, shadows moved stealthily, silhouetted by the dim light of the parking lot. At least 4 figures, maybe more, were stationed nearby, cutting off their escape route. They were surrounded. "They're expecting us," Marcus whispered, his voice low and urgent. "We'll have to fight our way out." Lisa's eyes widened in panic. "Fight? Against who? There are too many of them." "We don't have a choice," Marcus replied firmly. "Stay behind me and do exactly as I say. Megan, cover us." Megan nodded, raising her weapon as Marcus pushed open the door. The cool, night air hit them instantly, carrying with it the faint smell of gasoline and smoke. The attackers spotted them immediately, opening fire without hesitation. Bullets ricocheted off the metal doorframe as Marcus ducked back inside, shielding Lisa with his body. "Plan B," he muttered, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall. "We create a distraction." With that, he hurled the extinguisher into the parking lot, releasing a cloud of white powder that temporarily blinded their pursuers. Seizing the opportunity, Marcus bolted forward, motioning for Lisa and Megan to follow. Gunfire erupted around them, but they pressed on, dodging behind cars and using whatever cover they could find. For a moment, it seemed like they might actually make it. Then a sharp pain shot through Marcus's arm as a bullet grazed his sleeve. He stumbled but kept moving, gritting his teeth against the sting. There was no time to stop. Not now, not when they were so close. Finally, they reached a service vehicle parked at the far end of the lot. Marcus yanked open the driver's side door and slid behind the wheel, gesturing for Lisa and Megan to climb in. Tires screeched as he floored the accelerator, speeding away from the ambush just as reinforcements arrived. Breathing hard, Marcus glanced at Lisa in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" he asked, his voice strained but steady. She nodded weakly, clutching the flash drive tightly in her hand. "I'm fine, but I think we just made things personal." Marcus didn't respond. He already knew. From this point forward, there would be no turning back. Victor Kane wanted them silenced, and he wouldn't stop until they were dead. The service vehicle roared down the deserted highway, its tires screeching as Marcus pushed it to its limits. The engine growled under the strain, but he didn't ease off the accelerator. Every second counted now. Behind them, the two black SUVs followed closely, their headlights cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. They were relentless, gaining ground with each passing moment. Megan gripped the dashboard tightly, her knuckles white as she glanced nervously out the rear window. "They're not giving up?" she said, her voice tense. "What's the plan?" Marcus didn't take his eyes off the road. His mind was racing, calculating every possible move. "We keep moving," he replied firmly. "If we stop, we're dead. For now, our best chance is to lose them, or at least buy ourselves some time." Lisa sat hunched in the back seat, clutching her backpack like a lifeline. Her breathing was shallow, and tears streamed silently down her cheeks. She wanted to help, to do something, anything, but she felt powerless. All she could do was hold on and trust that Marcus knew what he was doing. The highway stretched endlessly before them, flanked by dense trees and occasional streetlights that flickered faintly. It was eerily quiet except for the roar of engines and the sound of gunfire erupting from the pursuing SUVs. Bullets pinged against the trunk of the service vehicle, denting the metal and shattering the rear window. Glass shards rained down into the back seat, forcing Lisa to duck low. "Stay down!" Marcus shouted without looking back. He swerved sharply to avoid another round of bullets, the tires squealing as the car fishtailed momentarily before regaining traction. The maneuver threw everyone inside forward, but Marcus managed to steady the vehicle just in time. "This isn't working," Megan muttered, turning to look at Marcus. "We can't outrun them forever. We need a better plan." "I know," Marcus snapped, frustration creeping into his tone. "But right now, survival comes first. Once we're clear, we'll figure out the next step." He scanned the road ahead, searching for anything, a turnoff, an obstacle, anything that might give them an advantage. Then he spotted it. A narrow dirt path branching off from the main highway, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. It wasn't much, but it was their only chance. "Hold on," Marcus warned as he jerked the steering wheel hard to the right. The service vehicle veered violently onto the dirt path, jolting everyone inside. The sudden change in direction caused one of the pursuing SUVs to overshoot, skidding past the turnoff and disappearing into the distance. The second SUV followed close behind, its headlights bouncing wildly as it struggled to navigate the uneven terrain. The dirt path twisted and turned unpredictably, forcing Marcus to slow down slightly to avoid crashing into trees or rocks. Still, they maintained a lead, putting enough distance between themselves and their pursuers to breathe a little easier. For now. After several minutes of navigating the treacherous route, Marcus spotted an old abandoned warehouse looming in the distance. Its broken windows and rusted metal walls gave it a ghostly appearance, but it offered cover, and that's exactly what they needed. There! Marcus pointed toward the building as he accelerated again. The service vehicle bounced, roughly over potholes and debris before finally coming to a halt near the entrance. Without wasting a second, Marcus turned off the engine and motioned for everyone to get out quietly. "We'll hide here until they pass," he whispered, leading the group inside. The interior of the warehouse was dark and musty, filled with piles of discarded machinery and stacks of rotting crates. It smelled of dampness and decay, but it provided shelter and, hopefully, safety. Once inside, Marcus quickly assessed their surroundings. He positioned himself near a crack in the wall where he could see outside without being seen. Megan stood guard near the door, her weapon drawn and ready. Lisa crouched behind a stack of crates, trembling but determined to stay quiet. Minutes passed like hours as they waited, listening intently for any sign of their pursuers. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Just when it seemed like they might have lost them, the unmistakable rumble of engines echoed in the night. "They're here," Marcus murmured, his voice barely audible. He peered through the crack in the wall, watching as the remaining SUV rolled slowly past the warehouse, its headlights sweeping across the area. Whoever was driving was cautious, methodical, exactly the kind of person you didn't want hunting you for what felt like an eternity. The SUV lingered nearby, its occupants scanning the surroundings carefully. Marcus held his breath, praying that they wouldn't notice the tire tracks leading to the warehouse. Finally, after what seemed like an agonizing wait, the vehicle moved on, disappearing into the darkness. When the coast appeared clear, Marcus let out a sigh of relief, but only briefly. "We're not safe yet," he said, turning to face the others. "They'll double back eventually. We need to move." "Where to?" Megan asked, lowering her weapon slightly. "We can't keep running forever." "No, we can't," Marcus agreed. "But we also can't afford to be caught, not until we expose Kane." He paused, glancing at Lisa. "Do you still have the flash drive?" Lisa nodded, pulling it out of her pocket. "It's safe," she assured him, though her hands trembled as she held it. "Good," Marcus said. "That's our leverage. But we need reinforcements, and fast. If Kane finds out we're alive, he'll send more people after us, and next time we might not be so lucky." Megan frowned, thinking hard. "There's a safe house about 20 miles from here," she suggested. "It's used by undercover agents sometimes. Remote, secure, and off the grid. We could hole up there until backup arrives." Marcus considered the idea for a moment. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than staying put. "All right," he said finally. "Let's go, but we'll need to be smart about this. No mistakes." As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Marcus took one last look around, ensuring they hadn't left any traces behind. Then, with Lisa and Megan following closely, he led the way back to the service vehicle. The engine roared to life once more as they sped off into the night, leaving the abandoned building and their pursuers far behind. For now, they had survived. But Marcus knew the real battle was just beginning. Victor Kane was powerful, ruthless, and desperate to protect his empire. And if they wanted to bring him down, they'd have to be smarter, faster, and stronger than ever before. As the miles rolled by, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Somewhere out there, Kane's operatives were waiting, planning, biding their time. The question wasn't whether they'd strike again, it was when. And when they did, Marcus vowed to be ready. The safe house was small and unremarkable, tucked deep within the woods far from prying eyes. It wasn't luxurious, just 4 walls, a roof, and enough supplies to last a few days, but it offered the one thing they desperately needed: security. For now, at least, they were hidden from Victor Kane's reach. Marcus sat at the table, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he worked tirelessly to organize the evidence against Kane. The flash drive Lisa had risked everything to retrieve contained more than just financial records or transaction histories. It held the blueprint of an empire built on lies, corruption, and fear. Every file decrypted brought them closer to dismantling that empire once and for all. Lisa hovered nearby, watching silently as lines of text appeared on the screen. She still clutched the flash drive in her hand, unwilling to let it out of her sight even though its contents were now backed up on multiple devices. Her eyes darted toward the windows every few seconds, scanning the darkness beyond for any signs of movement. Despite being miles away from their pursuers, she couldn't shake the feeling that danger was lurking just outside. Megan paced restlessly near the window, her weapon close at hand. Every so often she paused to glance through the blinds, checking the perimeter. The silence outside was unnerving, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or distant hoot of an owl. "Still nothing," she muttered under her breath, though no one replied. They all knew better than to relax, not until this was over. On the laptop screen, Marcus opened another folder labeled Operational Plans. Inside were detailed blueprints and schedules outlining Kane's upcoming cyber attack, a massive operation designed to cripple one of the largest financial institutions in the country. If successful, it would destabilize markets, wipe out billions in assets, and leave countless people vulnerable to exploitation. But thanks to Lisa's bravery, they had the tools to stop it. "This is it," Marcus said finally, leaning back in his chair with a heavy sigh. "If we can get this information to the right people, we can shut down the attack before it happens." "How?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even if we send it to the FBI, how do we know they'll act fast enough, or that someone won't tip off Kane?" Marcus hesitated, knowing she had a point. Trusting the system wasn't easy. Not when half the names on Kane's payroll included law enforcement officials and government agents. Still, they didn't have many options left. "We'll encrypt the data and send it directly to my director at headquarters," he explained. "He's clean. I've worked with him for years. Once he sees this, he'll mobilize every resource. We have to stop Kane." "And then what?" Megan chimed in, stopping her pacing to face him. "Even if we stop the attack, Kane isn't going to go quietly. He'll come after us harder than ever." "I know," Marcus admitted grimly. "But exposing him changes the game. Once the public knows who he really is and who's helping him, his power crumbles. Without allies, without resources, he's just another criminal." Lisa nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "What about us? What happens after this? Will we ever be safe?" Marcus met her gaze, his expression softening slightly. "I can't promise you that, not yet. But I can promise you this. I won't let him win, not while I'm still breathing." With that, Marcus began uploading the files to a secure server, encrypting each piece of evidence to ensure it couldn't be intercepted or tampered with. As the progress bar inched forward, the tension in the room grew thicker. This was their last stand, the moment where everything hung in the balance. Suddenly, the radio in the corner crackled to life, startling them all. A voice came through, staticky but clear. "Agent Johnson, this is Director Hayes. Do you copy?" Marcus rushed to the radio, grabbing the receiver. "This is Johnson. Go ahead, sir." "Your transmission came through. We've already alerted cybersecurity teams. They're working to neutralize the threat as we speak. Good work, Agent." Relief washed over Marcus, though only briefly. "Thank you, sir, but there's more. Kane has connections everywhere, politicians, executives, even law enforcement. You need to move quickly." "We will," Hayes assured him. "Stay put until backup arrives. And Johnson, watch your back." "Understood," Marcus replied before signing off. He turned to Lisa and Megan, his jaw set with determination. They're handling the attack. Now it's up to us to finish this. Over the next hour, they prepared for the final phase of their plan. Marcus drafted a detailed report summarizing Kane's operations, attaching copies of the most damning evidence. Lisa helped organize the files, double-checking each document to ensure nothing was overlooked. Meanwhile, Megan kept watch, ensuring their location remained secure. Finally, as dawn began to break, the sound of approaching vehicles reached their ears. Megan peeked through the blinds again, her shoulders relaxing slightly as she recognized the insignia on the arriving trucks. "It's backup," she announced, holstering her weapon. "We're clear." When the door opened, a team of federal agents flooded into the safe house, led by none other than Director Hayes himself. Tall and imposing, with sharp features and piercing eyes, Hayes wasted no time getting to the point. "Agent Johnson," he said, extending a hand. "Good to see you alive." "You too, sir," Marcus replied, shaking his hand firmly. "We've got everything you need to take Kane down." Hayes nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "Then let's make sure justice is served." As the agents began gathering the evidence, Marcus took a step back, allowing himself a rare moment of reflection. Over the past 24 hours, he'd faced betrayal, violence, and impossible odds. Yet somehow they'd prevailed. Not because they were stronger or smarter than their enemies, but because they refused to give up. Lisa approached him tentatively, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now," Marcus said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You disappear. Witness protection will keep you safe until Kane is behind bars. After that, well, maybe you can start fresh." Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes, but she managed a small smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Megan joined them a moment later, her demeanor lighter now that reinforcements had arrived. "You did good, Marcus," she said sincerely. "We both did." Marcus nodded, though he knew the fight wasn't truly over. Bringing down Kane would require months, if not years, of legal battles, investigations, and political maneuvering. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. Hopeful that truth could triumph over lies, that courage could overcome fear, and that justice might finally prevail. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden light over the trees, Marcus stepped outside to breathe in the crisp morning air. Somewhere out there, Victor Kane was plotting his next move. But Marcus knew one thing for certain: the tide had turned. And this time, Kane wouldn't escape the consequences of his actions. For Marcus, Lisa, Megan, and everyone else involved, the journey had been grueling, but it was far from over. True change never came easily, but it always began with a single step. And today they had taken that step together.